In the silvered quiet of a Venetian dawn, the lagoon holds its breath. Here, water and sky bleed into a single canvas of pale mist, a world of silent, shifting gray. Through this stillness, a shape emerges from the fog, an island, motionless but not empty, quiet but not at peace. For centuries, this small patch of earth has been forbidden, a wound in the heart of the lagoon that refuses to heal. The locals, when they speak of it at all, use a name heavy with finality: L'isola dei morti, the island of the dead. They say history is silent here, but that is a lie. History here is a scream trapped in amber. Beneath the suffocating ivy and the corrosive salt rot, the walls of Poveglia still breathe. As you draw closer, the first structure to resolve from the haze is a crumbling hospital facade. Its face is a mask of decay, windows like vacant eyes staring out at the water. Above a darkened archway, rusted letters cling to the stone, a faint stain of a name: Ospedale Psichiatrico di Poveglia, the psychiatric hospital of Poveglia. A door, nudged by a wind that carries no scent of the sea, swings open with a faint whisper of metal on stone. It is not an invitation. It is a warning. The island's memory is long and layered in blood and ash. Maps from the late 1700s show its first formal designation: a quarantine station. In 1776, as the Black Death returned to claw at the edges of Europe, Venice chose this isolated land as a final destination for its afflicted. Plague victims were brought here by the thousands, not for care, but for disposal. Their bodies were cast into vast open pits and set ablaze. The fires burned for so long and with such intensity that the soil itself was transformed. To this day, the earth of Poveglia is a composite of dirt and the fine gray ash of human bone. Then, in the early 1920s, the island's purpose was reimagined, draped in the clean white language of science and compassion. The quarantine station was reborn as a hospital for the mentally ill, a place for healing, the official record stated, a sanctuary for troubled minds. But on Poveglia, healing took on a different meaning. It was a cold, sharp word. Here, healing often began with a scalpel. Inside these hollow halls, rusted operating tables stand as silent monuments. Their steel surfaces are flecked with the dark blooms of dried corrosion, a permanent memory of what they were used for. The wind that moves through the empty wards is not a breeze. It is a long, low hum, a sigh that seems to rise from the very stones of the asylum. At the very heart of this institution of shadows, a brick bell tower stood sentinel. It was not a place of worship or a call to order. It was converted, its purpose twisted into something else entirely. It became an operating theater. The official records, terse and vague, mention its use for lobotomies and other experimental cranial treatments. But the unofficial history, the one whispered by the patients who survived, tells a darker story. They spoke of a doctor who worked primarily at night, a man who saw the fog that so often shrouded the island, not as weather, but as a symptom. They claimed he believed the plague had never truly left, that its essence had merely retreated from the body into the last place one would think to look, the mind itself. And he, the surgeon of Poveglia, possessed the tools to cut it out. For 100 years, the bell in that tower has been silent. Yet sometimes, on the wind, those who listen closely claim to hear a single faint toll, an echo from a time when the tower was a place of last resort. For decades, the island was left to its ghosts. Then, in the year 2009, a group of urban explorers breached its silent shores. They came with cameras and flashlights, expecting to document decay, to capture the poetry of ruin. The darkness inside the hospital was absolute, a thick, palpable presence. In their flashlight beams, dust motes danced like frantic spirits. They found what they expected: peeling paint, overturned furniture, the detritus of a forgotten world. But in one room, they found something that defied all expectation. In the old operating theater, surgical trays gleamed faintly, instruments laid out in neat, precise rows. The scalpels were aligned, the gauze still looked white, and one operating table was immaculate, as if awaiting its next patient. A close-up view of a metal surface revealed a faint crimson residue, glistening under the beam of a light. Later tests on the residue would prove inconclusive, but the mystery had already taken root. One of the explorers swore that as he stood there, the surgical lights above the clean table flickered on and stayed on, bathing the room in a cold, sterile glare. In that moment, the past was no longer the past. The echoes of footsteps that filled the silence were impossible to place. Were they his? Or were they the sound of someone else, from another time, walking these halls? The story of their discovery spread. Months later, a team of documentary students, armed with motion-activated cameras, returned to the island. They set up their equipment in the surgeon's tower, hoping to capture some anomaly, some proof that the stories were more than just legend. For weeks, there was nothing. Then, one night, at precisely 3:14 ante-meridiem, a camera was triggered. The footage it captured is grainy, distorted by static bursts, like a transmission from a dying world. In the flickering surveillance-style video, the operating room is not empty. Vague figures, tall and featureless in what look like white coats, stand in formation. Their movements are smooth, economical. They perform surgical gestures, their hands moving in a synchronized, rehearsed ballet of cutting and stitching. There is no patient on the table, only empty space. The authorities, when presented with the footage, were quick to dismiss it. Pareidolia, they said, the human mind's desperate need to see patterns in random noise, a trick of light and shadow, a compelling explanation, except for one inescapable fact. The power lines that once fed the island had been severed decades ago. The room had no electricity. The faint humming sound that fills the audio of the recording, a sound like faint, mechanical breathing, was not human. It was something else. Deep within the hospital's decaying archives, buried beneath layers of brittle, water-damaged papers, one name reappeared with unnerving frequency. The notes, written in fading Italian, all pointed to one man, Dr. Leone Santoro, 1934. He was a neurologist, a brilliant mind exiled from mainland Venice for pursuing unapproved and unorthodox experiments. His private journals were filled with obsessive theories, but one concept dominated his later work: post-mortem consciousness. Santoro held a radical belief that the human mind, the electrical essence of our being, did not simply extinguish at the moment of death. He theorized that it lingered, like static in a dead radio, an echo of thought trapped within the decaying vessel of the body. One line, scrawled in his journal, stands out, a question that seems to hang in the very air of Poveglia. If the body is a vessel, he wrote, then what happens when the vessel forgets to die? Today, the island continues to whisper its secrets. The locals, the fishermen who cast their nets in the lagoon's murky waters, claim you can still hear the patients. They say that when the fog rolls in, thick and silent, the voices rise from the island. They are not screaming in torment. It is something far more disturbing. They are calling out, rehearsing their pain. Layered whispers of "Aiutami," help me, have been captured on audio recordings, faint Italian voices that seem to play backward and forward at once. Inside the abandoned operating ward, lights have been seen to flicker once, twice, then steady themselves into a solid, unwavering glow, even though no power exists to fuel them. Independent paranormal investigators, armed with more than just cameras, have recorded their own chilling data. Inside the surgical wing, their instruments registered powerful electromagnetic spikes, readings that precisely matched the energy signature of active, modern medical equipment. As they watched their meters flare, the temperature in the room dropped a sudden 9 degrees within seconds. The cold was an aggressive, physical presence. Then came the sound of metal, the distinct sharp noise of a scalpel falling onto a stainless steel tray. Yet nothing had moved. There, on a nearby table, a single tray trembled slightly in the profound silence, as if from an unseen impact. Perhaps the explanation lies not in the supernatural, but in something even more unsettling. Repetition. These walls have witnessed centuries of concentrated suffering. Quarantine, isolation, experimentation. Perhaps trauma, when repeated for generations in a single contained space, leaves a fingerprint, an echo impressed upon space itself, a memory that replays on a loop, independent of time. Thermal footage taken in the operating theater shows a humanoid outline, a shape of cold, standing motionless at an operating table, a surgeon waiting for a patient who never leaves. The Italian government officially denies any paranormal activity on the island. Access remains heavily restricted, they claim, under a simple environmental pretext. The ground is unstable, the buildings unsafe, a logical, bureaucratic denial. But the men who work for Venice's sanitation department, the ones who patrol the lagoon in their garbage barges, they tell a different story, quietly, so as not to lose their jobs. They admit that every few months, washed up along the island's southern shore, they find things that should not be there. Fresh bandages and white gauze, tangled in the seaweed, clean and unstained by the salt and the water. In the year 2015, during a brief and quickly abandoned restoration effort, engineers made the most disturbing discovery of all. While examining the foundation of the bell tower, they detected a radio signal. It was a weak but continuous pulse, still transmitting from somewhere deep beneath the tower. The frequency was 128 hertz, not a random number. It is the exact frequency once used by a specific model of surgical sterilization device from the early 20th century. The steady rhythmic pulse filled the air, a heartbeat echoing through the static of a forgotten age. On the maps of today, Poveglia is just a ruin, an unnamed shape in the Venetian lagoon, a place erased by time. But here, at dusk, as the water reflects the soft orange light of the setting sun, the hospital sometimes glows faintly from a distance. A single window, high in the asylum, will become illuminated, and then, just as quickly, go dark again. Medicine once sought to cure the body by cutting into the soul, and perhaps, somewhere deep within these walls, behind the crumbling facade and the rusted letters, the surgery never really stopped. A bell tolls once, its sound swallowed by the fog, and then there is only silence.